Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I am your host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend, Michael Whifford.
Heyo!
So today, we are going to get into a bunch of different things, but mostly talking about the film, The Fellowship of the Ring. And, of course, when I say we're talking about The Fellowship of the Ring, I mean we're talking about the extended cut of The Fellowship of the Ring. Because as Mike and I were just talking about, there's really no other way to watch the movie, and we enjoy it so much more, and with all the little minute details and everything, but we'll get into all of that. So before we get into it, we're going to talk a little bit about some news and everything as well, because there's some good fantasy news brewing. But we are going to open up here again, just giving out our social handles, where if you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter, at Fantasy Rewind. And then on Instagram, if you want to follow the show there, it is at Fantasy Rewind Pod. If you want to reach out to the show with any comments, any suggestions for what we should cover or anything like that, we're open to talk about anything fantasy and would love to do so. So, jumping in here, Mike, we got some news regarding the House of the Dragon, which is coming to HBO soon. And so, do you want to tell us the release date for that?
Yeah, August 21st. So it's really interesting the timing they've decided, or the time frame they decided to release this, because now it's going to be in direct competition with The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power.
Yes.
So don't know if that was a wise decision, but at least we get to benefit from whatever they're trying to do, at least right now.
Yeah, I don't know how great of a decision it was for HBO to do that, but I think that it was a conscious decision to be like, oh, you're coming out with Rings of Power, bam, House of the Dragon, same time, like you said.
We're going to shut you down.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be great for us fantasy fans, and definitely looking forward to that. Before we hopped on here, we rewatched the trailer for House of the Dragon. Mike for the first time, myself, a couple different times, but look, the show looks really cool. It is just a teaser trailer that is available right now, kind of like with Rings of Power, with all these shows that are months and months and months out still. They're not releasing too much information, but we were talking about how the one criticism we really have of the teaser trailer so far is the hair and how strange Matt Smith, who you might know from Doctor Who, looks with a long-haired blonde wig. But I still am very excited about the show and all things in the realm of A Song of Ice and Fire. So going on from there, I just want to briefly mention the show Arcane on Netflix. I binged through the entire series on that yesterday. So I really enjoyed it. It's a League of Legends show. It's animated, and it was just really fantastic and very enjoyable. Do you have anything you want to say about it, Mike?
Definitely very well done. Me and my partner watched that a few months ago, and we really, really liked it. Like you said, League of Legends based. We used to play it a little bit. And again, really cool, the lore that they're taking from all these different spaces, video games, books, and turning them into these really awesome shows. And I love that it's animated and it's just so well done. The storytelling was just there, and so many people really liked it from some of the reviews and things I saw. So I'm really excited that animation is really being used, especially since you can't do all these effects and all these things that are talked about in books and shown in video games in live action films necessarily. So it's really neat for them to really embrace animation to tell all these stories.
Right, and just if you do go about trying to show certain things in live action with CGI and everything, sometimes it's not the best result, and you have people kind of doing a little cringe like you just did there.
Yeah,
but
doesn't always age very well either.
Yes, exactly. Whereas the animation, I don't know, some aging of it doesn't really work that well either, talking about Rankin Bass, but then again, you can do some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah, and I might argue that a little bit, thinking about The Last Unicorn, which was an animated fantasy movie from forever ago, maybe also done by Rankin Bass. I don't know, but that was very well done, and I still think it holds up kind of well.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
an entirely different discussion.
We could have a whole podcast on animated
shows.
Shows
yeah,
and movies. Because I mean, you take a look at like Dragon Ball and stuff like that, and it's still good for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
Outside of like 15 episodes on the same fight.
Moving on though to the next little bit of stuff we're going to talk about here is I recently just purchased what's going to be my next series that I'm going to take on, which was the Six for Crows duology here. So what I'm going to be doing next is right now I'm reading Wheel of Time. I am more than halfway. I'm like probably 75% of the way done with Crossroads of Twilight, and once I finish the Wheel of Time, I'm going to go on to reading The Lord of the Rings again, and I'm going to supplement that as well with the Six for Crows duology here. And so I'm looking forward to my fantasy reading for like the next several months. So, but what are you doing as far as your reading goes, Mike?
So I am still listening through Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, and I've started picking up a couple of podcasts, like lore podcasts on Lord of the Rings, in anticipation of moving into Rings of Power in the future. And so after this book on in the Wheel of Time, after I finish it up, which I'm pretty sure I'm still on the same one I was on forever ago, I am going to probably switch over to Lord of the Rings, and then I'm going to go into Mistborn, the Mistborn series. And so I think that's the direction I'm heading in right now. I'm still also finishing up the Sandman series, as well as, every other book I have on my to read list. But I think that's kind of the direction I want to go. Is I'm going to do Lord of the Rings next, kind of take a pause on Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings next, and then get into Mistborn and read through that. Either Mistborn or Stormlight Archives. Haven't decided yet, but it's going to be one of the Sanderson series.
If you go with Mistborn, the first trilogy is at least complete, so you can finish that up.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, there's like...
I know. I was saying like the first trilogy within the Mistborn series, because there's multiple timelines there. All right, but that's enough chit-chatting about other things here. Let's dive into the Fellowship of the Ring. Go for it, Mike.
I wanted to just kind of go and do the intro here. I'm not going to do any of the Elvish, because I would butcher it. The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. It began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and the will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. Deep in the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged a master ring. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all. Not getting into the whole thing, but I have to say, watching the movie, Dylan, you watched all 3 right in succession there. I just watched The Fellowship of the Ring yesterday, the extended cut, and I watched the original one so many times. I was telling you right before we started the podcast that I can still point out the things that weren't in the original cut of the movie. But it is. My wife was like, she was at a bridal shower, actually, Dylan's fiance's bridal shower, and she came back and she was like, "Oh, what'd you do today?" She was gone for 4 hours. I was like, "Oh, I watched the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring." She's like, oh, okay. What else did you do?
You're like, no, that's it.
I watched The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. It's 3 hours and like 50 minutes. So, it's definitely a slog of time. But like the beautiful thing about those movies is, one, they have aged really well. Like there's slight like things here and there, but that's just getting nitpicky. But I mean, overall, they're really well done, really well crafted. The acting is superb, and the effects are really, really good. And it's a 3 hour and 48 minute movie, but it doesn't feel like that.
It's more of an experience, I'd say, than like a time.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just a giant nostalgia ride, pretty much most of the time. And the music, I was texting you yesterday. It hits everything. Like the soundtrack on that is just masterful.
No, the music is fantastic. Like when I think of like a fantasy soundtrack, that is what I picture. Like it's done so well. Like when we were doing our D&D campaign, like at the start of the pandemic, we did a D&D campaign virtually over Zoom and everything. And like I'd play at some points like Lord of the Rings soundtrack in the background to set the mood. And like it's just so perfect for like any fantasy, like any high fantasy setting and everything. And like it's not there anymore, but like I remember watching the original movie, like the original cut of it on VHS, and just like finding the car that was driving by in the background and everything, and doing all kinds of like fun stuff with the movie itself. And then once they came out in the extended cuts, like it was this huge big deal, and like I ran out and bought them all on DVD right away. And oh man, like you said, a giant nostalgia ride that definitely still, in my opinion, holds up even like 20 years later.
Yeah, definitely does. Now, here comes the big question though, Dylan.
Yeah.
With the Fellowship, obviously we meet all of our intrepid heroes, the Fellowship of all of them. Do you think they could have just ridden the Eagles all the way?
That's the one criticism that everyone always has about the story for Lord of the Rings, and the answer is no. You couldn't just ride the Eagles all the way over, because like as great as that battle is later on in other movies with the Eagles versus the Fell Beasts, like it just wouldn't have worked. You'd try and do that, and you just see coming across the sky. It'd be nuts, but no, that would not have happened. You
just see all the animated, like, or the memes and all the animated things that...
Yeah, it's like, Lord of the Rings, over in 90 seconds, like with the flight there. Because the Eagles, they just hold themselves apart from the world. They don't tend to get involved. Even though, like, you could argue, Sauron is a big enough evil that they should have gotten involved. That's not the point of the Eagles. The Eagles are not, like, a kingdom that would be like ruled over by Sauron if he did come to power. Although he probably would.
Oh, he would have butchered them.
Yeah, he probably would hunt them down and kill them.
Or mutilated them and turned them into some fat, like, dark.
Well, like when you think about how like the orcs originally are like twisted elves as like their origin, which isn't in Fellowship of the Ring, but I'm sure he would do something similar to the Eagles. And Sauron would not have been contented with just Middle-earth. He would have expanded beyond, and I believe he probably would have tried to take on Valinor if he was able to, conquer Middle-earth, if he could get to Valinor. I don't know if he could or not.
Yeah, there's so much, like, J.R.R. Tolkien did such a beautiful job building this world off of a language, but there's just so much lore and everything else that I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've read the Silmarillion, and I'm that's why when I say I'm gonna reread Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna start with Silmarillion, then I'm gonna go into the Hobbit, and then I'm gonna go into the main trilogy. But like, I just don't remember like if you can actually get to Valinor by sailing to the west, out of the Grey Havens, or if it's like a special thing like where you have to be like invited and like take the boats or whatever to get back over to the Undying Lands there. But talking about the Fellowship of the Ring here, like, you have such an incredible story because, like you said, it is the start of this adventure. And it's actually my favorite of the trilogy because of that.
I would, yeah. At least movie-wise for me, I would say it's my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people, like, when you're talking about the negatives of the Fellowship of the Ring movie, even in the extended cut, there's no Tom Bombadil, there's no Goldberry, there's no Barrow Downs and stuff like that, but you have other things that just happen within it that are still so enjoyable. It's not a perfect adaptation, but it is still a very, very well done adaptation.
I mean, it keeps everything very interesting throughout the movie. There's no points during it where you're just like, okay, this is like slogging, it's, going too slow, or like, that was too quick, like, I don't understand why they're here. Like, it really takes its time, but it doesn't take too much time. You know what I'm saying? In terms of its pace and the things happening. Like, you have these very small moments of peace throughout that are quickly interrupted by some kind of peril or something trying to get in their way. And in those little short times, they're doing such great character building and creating chemistry between the Fellowship to really set up, like, why the other two movies happened, even after the Fellowship breaks apart.
So, real quick, one thing that I found very interesting, which I never noticed before until, like, I recently saw something about it, was how little interaction Legolas has with Frodo.
Oh,
not just even in Fellowship of the Ring, but in the entire trilogy of the movies.
Yeah, well, even Gimli and, like, Frodo don't really...
They talk when they're going through Lothlorien. They talk in Moria. They talk way more. But it's really funny. So, sticking with Fellowship, do you know how much Legolas says to Frodo?
Just when he's, like, saying he's going to go with him.
You have my bow. That's all he says to him the entire trilogy. But that is, the entire time of Fellowship of the Ring. That's all he says to him the entire movie. And like you said, it's almost 4 hours long. But I thought it was so interesting because, like, you never really, like, think about that. But,
no, you wouldn't have. And I think that was something, like, rewatching it, something I noticed was really the heavy interaction between Gimli and, like, Legolas, and like, they really did a good job setting, like,
building that friendship.
Yeah, kind of laying the base of it, starting in, like, a place of animosity and building towards a friendship. And so that's really cool because, like, by the end that they do become friends. And, like, I wonder if that meeting with Galadriel really played a big role for Gimli in that case. And also, too, like, the emphasis on Boromir. And really kind of building... I wish they had done more, like... A lot of the interactions with Boromir always seemed very much, like, somewhat positive, but then always ended in kind of, like, a weird note because he wanted the ring. I wish they had done for me, just a little bit more of a... Just slightly positive, so, like... At the end, you felt more.
Well, so what I'll say is if you continue to watch the trilogy, there's another part that's added in where Boromir retakes Osgiliath and, like, is claiming it for Gondor. And his father's like, oh, those greedy little elves, they have the ring. You need to get it and bring it here. And Boromir's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, why would I bring it to Gondor? And he's very resistant to the temptation of the ring from afar. But then once he gets to the actual, like, Council of Elrond and everything, what he says to the council is basically verbatim what his dad was telling him. Like, oh, it's a gift for the foes of Mordor. Like, all of that stuff is pretty much what Denethor was saying to him. But I think that Boromir is a very misunderstood character, and I feel like he gets a lot of crap for, being evil or being corrupted by the ring and everything, but he's way more than just that.
Yeah, he just wants what's best for his people, and I just wish, like, I know in the books you get more time with him, and I haven't read the books since like middle school for me, and so I mean, like, I don't really remember all the interactions with him, so that's why I'm very excited to reread The Lord of the Rings as well before Rings of Power comes out. But his character, I just wanted a little bit more time with him, and I know with the extended cut they did give you some more space with him interacting with Aragorn, and him and like
Merry and Pippin.
Pippin and Merry and Pippin, who I always loved Pippin, always my favorite out of the two of them. But I just wanted some more time with him before the end there, and so then you just felt a little more emotionally invested with his character.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, I think the extended cut does a very good job on making Boromir a little bit more human, where, like you said, it does add a lot more to his interaction with Aragorn, and that's the most interesting dynamic to me because of them both being men of Gondor, even though Aragorn, isn't really, technically from Gondor, because he was born out in the wilds, and even though he's the rightful king and all that. But it was such a very interesting character Boromir is, and I feel like Sean Bean did a very good job, portraying him, and unfortunately Boromir is just another one of the characters that's a checkmark on Sean Bean's death list. But
I know, he's got a long list of that.
Yeah, but it's still such a good movie, such a good character and everything. Talking about some of the other things that were done in the Fellowship of the Ring there, since you just watched it yesterday, was there a particular scene that stood out to you that you thought, like, really encompassed what you loved about the movie?
Oh man, there's too many. There's quite a few, actually, to be honest with you. I think at the beginning in the Shire, I want to take a step back and just say how much the Lord of the Rings movie and novels influenced all the fantasy writing we've seen.
100%,
since.
Yeah.
But just the beginning there in the Shire, and the whole party with Bilbo, and Bilbo eventually leaving, and then even I really liked the extended scene there where Frodo's in the bar with Samwise, and they're having a couple pints or half pints of ale, and you just see like how much like Frodo's at home there. And I think that was such a great scene because he gets thrust into this whole adventure, and the entire time you're like, he really wanted to be at home. It wasn't like Bilbo where he's like, I want to go back out and have an adventure. Like, he loved the Shire and he wanted to be there. And as the events unfold throughout the series, you're just like, wow, like, even though he wanted to just stay there and be comfortable, and he's doing all of this thing, he's going through all this adversity, he's taking all this pressure by carrying the ring, and it really makes you appreciate his character and some of the choices he makes. And so that was a big thing for me. Plus, like, I love that it sets up the dynamic between Sam and Frodo, which develops throughout the series. And I really do think that an extra scene really just added just enough to their like dynamic to really sort of explain why they why Sam did the things he did and why he was so bent on protecting Frodo. So
I feel like starting off in the Shire is of course a fantastic literary choice by Tolkien. Also, great choice to like kind of ground the series, and like here is what is at stake. You have this free folk who are very peaceful, very calm, just kind of like celebrating and living life, celebrating a birthday party at the start of the series, and then all of a sudden it goes down and they have to go on this giant adventure to destroy the ring. But setting up the stakes of, okay, here's what we're fighting for, here's what we're trying to, preserve, is so good. And, like, for me, like, one of my favorite scenes in Fellowship of the Ring is actually the scene in Lothlorien, where you have, like, the party walking in there after having just lost Gandalf, And then you have Galadriel
yeah.
just kind of coming in and like interacting with everybody and trying to like tell everyone don't give up hope,
really
you know,
scene.
like keep the fire alive, you know, like stick to your quest and everything. And it's several different scenes in Lothlorien there, but it does just to me kind of act as a reinforcer for what that first scene was trying to achieve, where you know you're reminded of that connection to all that is good and free in the world and what you're actually fighting for.
Yeah, that was a really good scene, and again, I think the extended cut did such a good job with that too. I added just a little bit of humor there with the part where Samwise, they're like singing the song "Mourning Gandalf's Loss" or death, and then Samwise is like, "Oh, there should be a verse about his fireworks." Yeah. And then he just starts singing it. I'm just like sitting there like, I forgot this was in here. It's just so good, but it just shows like the meaning of even Gandalf.
Yeah,
I mean, and which is just so important. And I, you know, if this was like, oh man, like 15 years ago when we first watched this, or however long ago when we first watched it, I'd probably go and say like scenes like the Mines of Moria, or well, that would probably be
that's up there.
One, like
that is up there.
Moria. I mean, it is. The fighting scene is awesome, but like now rewatching it, it's all these little scenes where they were having interactions as a group, and you were just starting to get more into their relationships and who they were as characters. Like those meant more to me this time watching through than I think I ever really paid attention to maybe before.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I still love the Khazad-dûm bridge scene with the Balrog and Gandalf.
Oh.
You shall not pass.
You shall not
it's
pass.
Such an amazing scene. I love that scene a lot too.
It is iconic.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I think that the highlights for me of Fellowship of the Ring and what to me sets it above the other two films isn't the action scenes. For me, it's all the world building. It's all like the hero's journey scenes that you get throughout it that build upon the characters and make you fall in love with these characters every time you watch it. And that to me is what keeps me coming back to that particular film, that particular series, and just that world in general.
Yeah. I'd agree 100% with that. It's because this movie is so well done, it's the other two can do what they do, where they focus more on just the action. Because you already have the motivation set up. You already have what's at stake set up. And so you don't really need to keep going over that stuff as you go into those other two movies. You can really just focus on, you know, building towards this giant climax at the end.
So, getting into some questions here for you about Fellowship of the Ring here.
Oh, well, wonderful. Quizzes.
No, I'm not quizzing you about like what happened.
I know, it's okay.
Okay, so I asked you like what your favorite scene was for the movie and everything like that. Was there a particular scene that you feel like didn't hit for you, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would probably say, still the interaction between Gandalf and Saruman, like when Gandalf goes to seek his counsel, and you know they start fighting and stuff. Like rewatching that, I was like, you know, it was really cool what they could have done without doing like wavy CGI lines for magic and stuff. Like just the force of power and the music, like that really drove home what was happening there. But I wish there was a little bit more in there about. And I know you get, thankfully, like when they did The Hobbit, you got a little bit more of Saruman, and you got it. Oh, he's starting to turn a little bit away from the forces of good, but like just a little bit more of his reasoning and his understanding and trying to convince Gandalf. Like he just like sitting there. Gandalf's like, okay, I'm gonna go, and then he just starts closing the doors, and he's just like, join me. Like, okay, why should I? You know, we've been fighting this evil for so long. Like, you know, give me this big old speech on all the reasons why you think it's better. And he just doesn't really. He just says it's like a hopeless cause. And I don't know. Maybe just something more to make me see why he would want to veer in that direction.
Yeah, so to me, like, again, that is one of the weaker scenes for Fellowship of the Ring. And one of the reasons I feel that way is because, like, how out of place it seems when compared to the rest of the not just the movie, but the rest of the series, where you have this wizard on wizard battle, but just, like, the way that it's done with Saruman kind of, like, spiraling Gandalf up the tower at the end there. It's really cool looking visually. But I was like, was he gonna die? Like, first time I watched the movie, I was like, is he gonna slam into the tower and, like, die, or what's happening there? And then of course, no, he's just on top of Orthanc and just, you know, chilling up there waiting for the eagles to come and rescue him and everything. But yeah, I think the motivation for Saruman has always been one of the weaker points of it. And for me, like, what I got as, like, his motivation was just that he feels like it's self-preservation almost. Like, he doesn't feel like he can compete against Sauron, so he's going to just kind of join him and be on the winning side. It's like, oh, you're bigger and stronger than them. Let me put my cards on your table over here. So
yeah,
that's what I got.
But I mean, to just completely, like, because I mean, the wizards were placed there to help preserve the races of Middle Earth, and then, you know, you join, okay, I'm going to join his side, and then it's just like, rip all the trees up, let's create some weird, like, things, like, basically a complete betrayal of who his character had been for centuries, or who he was for centuries. So just maybe even a flashback of seeing some of the, like,
I would have loved to have been able to see some good Saruman. And I know we get that in some of in The Hobbit, and that is,
but just a little bit. It's still kind of, like, tainted. So.
Right, like you said, like, for me, like, when, I don't know, we're talking about Fellowship here, but when we're looking at the Hobbit movies, like, the scene where you have Galadriel and Elrond, or no, Elrond wasn't there. It was Galadriel, Saruman, and Gandalf going and fighting, like, the sorcerer, the necromancer at Barad-dûr. Like, that scene there is, like, the one scene in the entire, like, universe that we have on film so far where Saruman is acting good. But even in that scene, you get the sense, like, oh, what did I just do? Like, I can't do this. I need to change sides. Like, you see those seeds of doubt being planted even in that fight.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. Going back to Fellowship here, like, one of the things that is a little bit of a common complaint as well about Fellowship of the Ring is that the entire movie is them just walking. But I think we've kind of covered, like, why we feel like that's not a bad thing. Because it does set you up on this actual journey, and part of a journey is walking, but part of what happens during that long walk is growth for the different characters and the bonding and the fellowship, becoming friends and everything like that. What are your thoughts on the walking complaint?
I think it's silly. As we talked about, like, those, a lot of the times when they just showed him walking, there were still interactions between characters. Like, I mean, most of the time they were running, obviously. But, like, the walking scenes, like when they're going up the mountain and they have that short scene there where Frodo trips and the ring comes out and, like, Boromir picks it up, and it's like, that's a very meaningful scene because, one, it shows that Aragorn is there for Frodo and for protecting the ring, not for, being Boromir's buddy or anything like that, like, because he was ready to kill him. He had his hand on a sword. Boromir, it shows his temptation still with the ring, and why, like, later on in the series, like, Frodo, in the movie, that Frodo never felt comfortable around Boromir, really. And I just think all those little scenes, they were always very purposeful, you know? And I think it's silly to say that. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
They walked. It wasn't just walking.
But going to, like, the final battle of Fellowship of the Ring here, when Frodo and Sam leave the Fellowship, with the Uruk-hai going on, like, that particular scene right there, I feel like it is a great climax because you see all the mistrust of Boromir, all the temptation of Boromir manifest itself as he tries to take the ring from Frodo, but then you also see him instantly being like, what have I done? Like, why did I just do this thing? And he instantly goes to redeem himself, in my opinion, by trying to rescue Merry and Pippin and standing up for them and trying to prevent the Uruk-hai from taking them. And he fails, but the fact that he did, like, Lone Ranger it against an unsurmountable force, like, that to me showed Boromir's true character.
I'd agree 100% with that. I think that was a great redemption for him after he fell to temptation. Right. And I think you bring up, even you weren't, if this wasn't your intention, but you brought up such a great point. Like, there were so many scenes in this movie where people were tempted. Usually Boromir. But I mean, also Galadriel and Gandalf all were tempted at certain points, and it shows just how
Aragorn.
Aragorn as well. Just how desirable the ring was to people, and how special halflings were. These unassuming creatures that everyone wrote off. Like, when Elrond was talking to Gandalf about who's going to take the elves' place of protecting Middle-earth, and he's like, dwarves? They care nothing. And about, what's happening to people. Man? Like, they don't even mention... like,
not for nothing, but hobbits weren't really warriors.
I know, but I'm just saying. Like, they didn't even, like, mention them in this, like, as, like, a group of people, like, that were involved in this. So, I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting, that all these people, all these big, powerful people were so tempted by this, but this unassuming hobbit, never really was.
And see, I think that's
at
the
point,
point, though.
Consciously was.
Is that, like, you have, like, this person who, or, like, this, I don't know, I want to say a race of creatures, race of characters, because I don't know if every hobbit would have been so resilient, but you have this character who is this unassuming, purely good person who is able to resist the temptation of evil for so long. And I mean, watching the series, there's a lot of times where Frodo is tempted by the ring, and a lot of times where he's putting it on when he shouldn't be, despite warnings. But at the same time, like, I feel like he resisted so much more than anyone else would have been able to because of just the pure goodness in his heart. And although, like, after watching the series, I was like, damn, Frodo kind of sucks after the whole series is done. But he is being tested way more than anyone else. And, like, it's hard to keep in mind the actual strain that is being put on him. And, like, that's why, like, when you see him...
turns people so quickly.
That's why, like, when you see him putting on the ring and everything like that, and the fact that he was able to resist doing so for so often, it's crazy to think the distance and the time that he actually was able to hold out against evil.
Yeah. I want to kind of move it along. Keeping on with the ring, though, I know for me, as somebody who just watched the show and movie, and it's been forever since I read the Silmarillion, but even thinking about the show coming out, Rings of Power, watching this movie, the power of these rings really isn't communicated, I think, in a very meaningful way.
I agree.
Like, it's like, oh, they got all these rings, but, like, what do they do? Instilled in them is the power and will to govern every race. Okay, but, like, what do these rings actually do?
Well, you have the one ring that all you really see it do is turn Bilbo invisible.
Turn people invisible.
But like you said, like, you don't see... like Gandalf or Galadriel doing any of their magic stuff and then putting on the ring and doing a bigger magic thing or anything like that. Like, it's not explicitly clear in the movie exactly how this ring makes them more powerful. But yeah, I agree. That could have been done better.
And also, too, this is kind of just a slight plot hole, and maybe you'll be like, oh, no, this is why. But if the whole thing is like Frodo cannot put the ring on because then they're going to know exactly where it is, like, but Bilbo was putting it on and off for years. So...
Yeah, I think, like, one of the arguments for that was just that you have Sauron, who's not at full enough strength yet during the time of The Hobbit, where, like, because you got to think about he was coming back as, like, the necromancer of Barad-dûr, and then he got defeated again from there.
Down. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, like, it is a little bit of a plot hole. I did think about that, too, because like you said, Bilbo used the ring so often during The Hobbit, and he used it throughout his time in the Shire again. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was the depiction of Gollum in Fellowship of the Ring. So, we only see Gollum twice in Fellowship of the Ring.
Getting tortured, and then, like, when he's following him.
Yes, getting tortured, and, you know, the I forget which tower he's in, but he's getting tortured in Mordor, and then also when he's following Gandalf and the group in the Mines of Moria.
Which, how did he get in the mines when the entrance was sealed?
Because he's sneaky and he knows the ways.
Okay.
Because of plot. But,
you know what I'm saying? Another little plot hole there. Also, how did he get out when there was all those orcs and, like, I don't know. Just a Balrog, so just, you know, just some.
And actually, there. We do see Gollum again as well. We see him floating in the river, with a log, so you don't see, like, the entire body of Gollum ever in the movie. But what I wanted to ask you about was, in the Fellowship, at least in the Mines of Moria scene, Gollum looks very, like, dark. Like, he looks almost grayish-bluish when you see him in there.
Yeah.
And compared to, you know, the pale creature that we see throughout the rest of the series there. So I wanted to ask your opinion on that.
I just think maybe they hadn't had it completely figured out yet, and then, like, when they did... So it's kind of good that we didn't see more of them in the first one, but when we do see more of them in the second movie, and third movie, obviously a lot, they were like, this is much more appealing and a little offsetting. I think... I think it was definitely a good choice there.
Me too. It really reminded me...
Not show too much.
It really reminded me of the Hobbit cartoon, actually, because Gollum is, like, a grayish creature in that. And so seeing him in, like, that one Mines of Moria scene, it reminded me of that bit there. But, yeah, that's all I got for Gollum. And I agree. I think it's a good thing that he was not included. Just kind of, like, tease that a little bit.
Yeah. I definitely... I'm just going to come back and just say, like, this is still my favorite of the three movies. I love the little throwbacks. Like, even in the extended cut when they were underneath the trolls and they were like, look, Mr. Look, Mr. Bill... Samwise is like, look, Mr. Bilbo, it's... look,
Mr. Frodo, it's Bilbo's trolls.
yeah, there you go. I just like that because it's such a great callback to that.
And I think it's so funny, though, too. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
it's so funny to me, too, like how you're saying now that Fellowship is your favorite movie, but, like, when we had this talk a little bit ago, like, because you just watched it yesterday, we had this talk a while ago, you were like, I don't think Fellowship's my favorite. I think it's Two Towers. I think it's Return of the King. I forget which one you said.
I would not have said... I don't think I would have said Two Towers. I would have said Fellowship.
You would have said Fellowship? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's always...
But yeah, anyways, I think it's, like, just important for me to, like, to emphasize, like, this is an underrated part of the trilogy. And I feel like a lot of people might not identify it as, like, their favorite of the series. But it's so good.
Well, it's kind of like... It makes me think of Star Wars, right? A lot of people would say their favorite movie is...
Episode 5?
I don't know. It's the one where they're on Hoth at first.
That's... Yeah, I think it's either 5 or 6. I don't know. I think it's 5.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back, 5.
Yeah, whereas, like, you know, everyone has their favorite there, but, like, mine was always, like, the third one.
That one's... Return of the Jedi is really good, too, but... Yeah. The second in the original trilogy is my favorite of Star Wars, too.
Yeah. Anyway, so... it was really great coming back in, watching this. I think we'll definitely do another episode on Two Towers and one on the Return of the King. Kind of talk about those. I think it'd be cool. It'd be neat to again have somebody on maybe to talk about those movies or those books and how they were really important to them, or if someone who hadn't maybe seen them before watched them. That'd be cool too. So
I
don't have anyone in mind for this.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if, like, Alexis would be down because I don't.
She's like, these movies are 3 hours long. No, thank you. And then when I was like, no, it's actually like closer to 4 hours. Like, no, that's not happening. So she will not. She would not be one.
I don't know.
Of
Maybe
them.
I'll talk with Amy and see if she would.
Yeah, or if any listener is like super passionate about these movies, like absolutely send us a DM. We can maybe set something up there. Or if none of you are, that's fine too.
Yeah, we'll have this conversation if it's the two of us, or if we want to get a third person in here for an even broader discussion too. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right, but I think that's gonna wrap up our little discussion here regarding Fellowship of the Ring. And just ending again, saying how much we both just absolutely love the movie, and really looking forward to more Lord of the Rings discussion in the months to come. All right, well, with that, this is Two Nerds signing off. See ya.
See ya.